Hello, this is Caproon. Today I will be presenting on multicultural mental health, how treatment for mental health can be improved by understanding that mental illness, like everything, is different from culture to culture. There are many aspects of the human condition that are universal, such as greeting one another, but even this innate behavior is performed differently from culture to culture, whether it be by handshaking, kissing, or bowing, or, giving someone a middle finger. Mental illness does not discriminate and is very prevalent in every culture, but its symptoms do show differently. Moreover, there are mental health conditions that are exclusive to some cultures. This is called cultural bound syndrome. A cultural bound syndrome, also known as cultural concept of distress according to DSM-5, is a group of psychological symptoms that appear to be greatly influenced by cultural factors, and therefore occur far less often, or are manifested in highly diverse ways in other cultures. Hikikomori and that are examples of cultural bound syndromes. Why this is important? The science of psychiatry and psychology was largely developed in the West, America, Europe, etc., so there's a tendency for other cultures to evaluate local psychological problems in terms of how well they fit into the Western diagnosis. However, this can lead to sufferers of mental illness to go undiagnosed. To be effective at treating the psychological problems of people from all different cultures, therapists strive to achieve cultural competence. So the rest of this presentation will be examples of cultural bound syndromes, stigma and societal factors, and treatment. Sweat. Hikikomori translates being confined, pulled in. Hikikomori appears to be a largely unique Japanese form of psychopathology in its presentation and prevalence, so it's considered a cultural bound syndrome. It's primarily diagnosed in Japanese adolescents, mostly male, although some girls, normally in high school, sometimes in response to bullying. Symptoms include depression, social withdrawal, and an over 6-month absence from society. Psychiatric treatments have been shown to be ineffective for patients. Peer supports have been demonstrated to be effective in the rehabilitation of hikikomori and modern-type depression. More quick examples of cultural bound syndromes. Kufungisisa, thinking too much, in Shona, a language spoken in Zimbabwe. That syndrome, morbid and crippling anxiety over the fear of leaking semen due to its cultural significance, especially in South Asia. Lota, a condition observed in Malaysian cultures in which an individual, after experiencing a shock, becomes anxious and suggestible, often imitating the actions of another person. Stigma and societal values, and how it affects individuals being diagnosed from other cultures. Although stigma appears to be a universal phenomenon, its meanings, practices, and outcomes differ across cultures. Western culture tends to be less stigmatizing and more accepting of people with mental illness and their families, while non-Western cultures show little tolerance toward mentally ill people and their relatives. So this greatly affects not only the way symptoms of mental illness manifest, but also whether or not someone ever is able to receive treatment at all. For example, mental illness is perceived as a taboo among the Palestinian population in Israel. For this population, public stigma results from the view held by the family and ethnic community that the individual is socially unacceptable. In addition, self-stigma can occur when individuals internalize public stigma and begin to view themselves as socially unacceptable. In conclusion, culture can be like a language. It can be something you share or something that creates a barrier. But to be able to offer help to those from other cultures, it at least needs to be understood. Perceptual misunderstandings between the practitioner and patient have the potential to derail treatment. When the globalized knowledge of the therapist and the localized knowledge of the patient meet head-on, the collision can create confusion that damages therapeutic communication. Gauthier, Pettifor, and Ferreira published a guide in 2010 for helping clinicians treat Asian American patients specific to clinical psychology. This is the list that they made. 1. Identify the individuals and groups potentially affected by the assessment of treatment. 2. Identify the ethnically relevant issues and practices and the nature of the dilemma, including whether there is a conflict between principles, values, or interests of those involved in the case. 3. Analyze how your personal biases, stresses, self-interest might influence your assessment or treatment. 4. Develop alternate courses of action if necessary, i.e. referral, and analyze the potential benefits or harm associated with the assessment or treatment, taking into account threats to reliability and validity of the assessment or treatment. Choose a course of action, act, evaluate the results, and if necessary, re-engage in further assessment or treatment. And 6. Consider if any actions on your part might help or hinder the client or be misleading in any way. This can be applicable to any person from a culture vastly different from the one they are being treated in, regardless of ethnicity, but is especially helpful in the United States and the West, where most of the understanding of psychology and discourse about it has excluded cultural bound syndromes from Eastern and indigenous cultures, because mental illness, like many facets of global psychology, are multicultural. Thank you for attending.